Hi everybody, it's Chris Kandar here and welcome to FAQ, Faith and Quarantine. Each weekday we look at a different part of the Bible to help us figure out how to live well in this moment. And we are looking at the book of Nehemiah. I remember reading Nehemiah as a teenager and being inspired to think of him as a great leader. He shows excellence in leadership. I think there was a book titled exactly that kind of walked you through the lifestyle of Nehemiah. And I think whether you consider yourself a leader or not, there is something important, or loads of actually lessons that we can learn from Nehemiah about how to live well in the middle of crisis, challenge, and actually some amount of despair. The chapter 1 kicked off with Nehemiah in tears, distraught about his nation, Israel, even though he'd never lived there. He'd been born in captivity, in exile, in the citadel of Susa, and he'd risen to important prominence, I guess, as a civil servant, cupbearer to the king, maybe a kind of version of a disposable bodyguard, but also somehow a close confidant. He would have witnessed a lot of the things that the king Artaxerxes would have seen. And we noticed yesterday that this story kind of transitions quite nicely from the book of Esther, because Esther was married to King Xerxes, who was King Artaxerxes' dad. Now, we don't know who King Artaxerxes' mother was. I mean, theoretically, it could have been Esther, but King Xerxes seemed to have a lot of wives, so we can't know that for sure. So there has been this kind of incredible, brave witness of a Jewish woman standing up for her nation, saving them from genocide, and Mordecai, her adopted dad, being appointed as prime minister. And so there was this legacy of courageous leadership demonstrated in a previous generation. And now Nehemiah's turn has come. And he has approached the king, asking for some help. And this is what he said at the end of chapter 1. Give your servant, he prays, give your servant success today by granting him favour in the presence of this man. I was cupbearer to the king. Now, probably similarly to King Xerxes, King Artaxerxes wouldn't have wanted to be interrupted. Do you remember even Esther couldn't even visit King Xerxes without permission? Well, imagine a cupbearer. They were normally seen and not heard, I imagine. They listened to loads of stuff, but they wouldn't have necessarily been given voice very often. And so Nehemiah prays this really long prayer that he might have confidence to speak the right words in the right way, that he might be part of God's plan for restoring Israel. So chapter 2 kicks off. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. So that's interesting, isn't it? That as a professional, Nehemiah had kind of kept a stiff upper lip. He'd demonstrated a professional attitude. He hadn't allowed his face to be downcast. And that was his little signal. Sometimes you could say a lot without many words. So he let his face be sad. And the king had observed him and realised this must have been a deep sadness within his heart, and actually asked him a question. And there's something important here, isn't there? Sometimes we Christians think we have to speak all the time. We just got to turn every conversation to Jesus. It's through our words that are our most important witness. And sometimes there's a time for words and there's a time for silence. It says that in 1 Timothy. It talks about wives winning their unbelieving husbands over without words. Now, never want to cop out of using words, but there are times when using too many words become nagging. And so I think Nehemiah plays a really clever play here, doesn't he? The king knows who he is. He's demonstrated his integrity over the years, and now he does something that's going to prompt a response. This is a provocative facial expression that opens up a conversation. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Wow. So there it is. It's like he'd prepared it in his mind. He had a little phrase that he was going to say if the king gave him an opportunity. And in he goes, why shouldn't I be sad when the city that my fathers are buried in has been laid to ruin? There was a connection. There was an imaginative connection. Even though Nehemiah had never lived in Jerusalem, the city had symbolic meaning. I was thinking about this yesterday. My father's from Malaysia, and if I heard that KL was on fire, I would be upset even though I'd never lived there. But I think there's something even more poignant for Nehemiah. He knows this is the foundation for his faith. And he is a man of faith. The faith has been transmitted to him from his ancestors, even though he's living in exile. That's a real challenge for us, isn't it? How do we pass the faith on to our children in a way that they don't get assimilated into the culture, but they don't stand out in a way that is inappropriate? How do they become dual citizens of the kingdom of God and the United Kingdom if you live in the UK? And somehow Nehemiah's got this right, hasn't he? He's got esteem and he's got opportunity to be in front of the king of the largest empire of his day. And so he has a standing in the kind of city of man, but he also is aware of the presence of God. He's got this kind of dual citizenship. He knows how to conduct himself. And that is such an important way for us to live. Too many Christians live in isolation from the world and some kind of, I don't know if you saw the book, The Benedict Option. We're supposed to live undercover in a bunker away from the world because it's too polluted. Or other Christians live so assimilated to the world that they're no different from it. And Nehemiah walks this incredible, challenging path that I think is the Christian way to live, that we are citizens of the world, but also citizens of heaven. Anyway, what does he do? The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Now, I love this bit. "Then I prayed to the God of heaven and I answered the king." Wow, then I prayed to the God of heaven. He's in the presence of the king. He's mid-conversation. The king's asked him the big question, what is it you want? And so he shoots up a prayer. Many people have called this an arrow prayer. You know, he hasn't kind of got on the floor and started praying. He hasn't started fasting. He hasn't kind of just recited the Lord's Prayer 50 times. He hasn't gone into silent retreat for 5 hours. Just in the middle of the moment that he's in, he shoots up a prayer. And man, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be out of your depth. And you need to seek God's wisdom right here, right now. Many Christians set aside time in their day to pray to God, and that's important. But there's also this other idea of kind of continually practicing the presence of God and reaching up to him in the middle of your day, in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a phone call, in the middle of an argument, and say, "God, please help me get this right." And here is Nehemiah in the middle of that. Then I prayed to the God of heaven and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favour in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried, so that I can rebuild it." Wow, there you go. If it pleases the king, send me. Here I am, send me. Permission me to go. And actually, as king, you've got lots of resource and power. Send me. Let me go and let me take some of the state's power with me. That's incredible. And I'm going, hold on, Nehemiah, you're a cupbearer to the king. You might be brilliant at tasting wine, checking if there's poison in it. You're a trusted civil servant. But what do you know about rebuilding a city? Are you a skilled craftsman? You know, how do you think you're going to do this? But this seems to be a divinely appointed plan, and God equips us for what he calls us to do. And so he steps out, I think, pretty much out of his comfort zone, puts himself out there, makes his tremendous request to the king. This is courageous leadership right here, but it's humble leadership dependent on God. And oh, what a brilliant, brilliant guy. Okay. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take, and when will you be back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I think Nehemiah must have done some homework. He must have figured out how long it will take before he asked the question, so he had an answer ready. I also said to him, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah." He really has thought this through, hasn't he? What am I going to need before I go? I'm going to prep for this meeting. I am going to pray in the moment, but I'm going to think, what is it I need? Yeah, it's going to be hard getting through that region without the king's permission. The king's got power. I'll use that power to open doors for me. So that's what I'm going to need. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence I will occupy. So you go, okay, right, you've thought through how you're going to get there, some of the resources you're going to need. You've made a plan. It's like you've kind of got a checklist, and you have pre-thought out all the various elements. The king's got a forest, we can make use of that. I love the way his brain works. He's being really entrepreneurial, visionary, and yet he's he's very savvy in his kind of political maneuverings. Oh, there's so much wisdom here. This is a classic example of someone being as innocent as a dove and as cunning as a snake. He gets this right. And I have had the privilege of meeting so many Christian leaders, and actually not just Christian leaders, but that think like this, but Christian leaders who are humbly trying to make a difference in the world, and they are full of worldly kind of savvy wisdom, but they're also incredibly humble and dependent on God. And that's a lovely combination. It's rare when you find it, but I've had the privilege of meeting so many of them. I've been putting together a little podcast of it's called Leader Shift that will come out later in the year, and it's full of savvy, wise Christian leaders who have combined great wisdom and great faith. And that combination is here perfectly modelled in Nehemiah. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my requests. I love that. It isn't saying, oh, because I was so wise and clever, because I was so wily and courageous, the hand of the king was open to me. No, it was because God was with me that I was able to do this. So I went to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. When Sanballat and Horonite and Tobiah and the Ammonite officials heard about this, they were very much disturbed, and someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Okay, God is with him. He had favour with the king, but the story's not over yet. We're going to read more about this later on in FAQ.